This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
I remember the first time I said yes, I was like, dude, that guy that's talking right now, which is me, is an idiot. What is he talking about, right? And I kept on going and going and going. And before you knew it, about a year later, I was flying to Mongolia with the National Geographic grant, all my friends.
I have a nickname for you, and this might not be a good place to start, but I mean, if I've got the Courageous Podcast, I kind of have to go there on the nickname, and it's not what you think, okay? Not what you think. So I kind of landed on, yeah, he's ready for it. He's giving me like, bring it on. All right. It's and man, and it's not ants man. Don't confuse that. It's and man. It's ampersand man. You are and man to me because yes, you're man and machine, right? Yes, and man. Okay. you are like, you're using technology and you're honoring the past. Like you're being very respectful and thoughtful on how you go about the world. It's tech and humanity as you go about doing what you do. So I love the duality of everything you do. It's not just you're living, even the way you talk about it, you're not just looking at the past and the future. It's like you're doing both. You're honoring both worlds. Like, is this a deeply, how thoughtful are you as you go about these adventures to honor?
Super thoughtful. Everything in life is more complicated than black and white, obviously, but there's a duality in everything, right? The kind of yin and yang of all things, right? But when it comes to the ancient past, and you think about the kind of work that I've been such an adventure. It's been such a ride. But to be able to take really high-tech tools and apply it to exploration, that's just what exploration is, right? Like that's what it's always been. And to take it and apply it to archaeology, maybe we are looking at the ancient past using these modern tools, but every time you open a new door or go to a new frontier, it's going to be because some innovation allowed you to step a little further, right? Whether it was a spaceship or a microscope or a telescope, or in a lot of the work that I've been doing more recently, it's like using lasers on little drones to try to punch through the canopy and find those pyramids hidden within. But it's all just been driven by this one kind of very human, basic principle of curiosity. And then I guess, you apply whatever tools you got to it.
Yeah, this is, I feel like I have to be really careful now because I'm like, well, I worked on this and I worked on that. But you reminded me of, have you ever heard of DRD47R? Do you know this?
No,
Okay,
no, I don't.
Okay, this is not this is a real thing. So DRG47R is the wanderlust gene. Okay, so evidently 20% of the US population, I don't know if it's global, but I know 20% of the US population has the wanderlust gene, and it's the DRD47R. And it's all about curiosity and wonder. I mean, look, I don't think we need to test you. I think it's clear that you have it. But like as you think about your definition of wonder, like if there's a criteria for an adventure that you're like, yes, absolutely yes, what's that criteria look like?
I don't know why. It's there's the superficial part of things, right? The adventure is really fun. The kind of stuff that gets us to the places that not very many have been usually require a bit of true physical exploration. And that's a big part of my life. I love that. I love being in the wilderness on the top of a mountain, climbing, through the glaciers or down into a jungle. And for me, there's a special meaning behind a lot of this now that kind of came halfway through my life when all of a sudden it felt like all of that would be taken away from me. And then, well, can you still do these things? So now, I mean, I know you know this, but maybe for the audience, I live with a prosthetic foot, right? So I've got this kind of high-tech carbon foot. But at one point, I had no idea. I'd never even met an amputee before. So, lying in a hospital bed, wondering what that life is going to be like, I thought all those adventure days that I started out with as a kid and then grew up with as a young adult and then applied into my career, I thought maybe it was on hold or maybe it was done. And And so now when I go into the field, this is pretty new. This is like about 6 years old or 7 years old. Now when I go out into some far off wilderness, every step has just that much more gratitude behind it, because that's something, being in the wilderness, that's something that has been a big part of my life since my early childhood. I've actually been, so I know this is a bit of a ramble, but maybe the deeper criteria is, it goes back to that early childhood, like what drove me to get into all this. And I grew up all over the world. I grew up the son of on one half, my dad was an astrophysicist, and on the other half, my mom was a former actress and musician, and they kind of just floated around the world, and we go from Europe to Asia to Germany, wherever my dad could get a job, basically thinking about the universe. Like, what a weird job. I'm going to
So
think about the universe.
cool.
Yeah, and part of that came with feeling like a transplant everywhere I went. Like I didn't really look like anybody anywhere I went. I didn't really speak the same language as most of the places I showed up in school with early on. And so there was always this feeling like I was an outsider. And I think when I really pinpoint back why I'm now always on a quest to try to find out more about what unites us as humans, whether it's in our ancient times or into the future, is probably because I'm fighting to sort of redefine all that from my inner childhood, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
we aren't all different. We're actually all very, very similar, and we all do belong. We all actually have this very common human existence that is kind of all one tribe versus a bunch of sub tribes.
I think, I mean, the term you use, that you're an outsider, that's so you're a literal outsider. Like that's what you do, is you're outside, and you're helping us all connect on the inside with what's going on the outside. I'm really curious if you feel that growing up, I mean, you're basically a citizen of the world. I mean, you've been pretty consistent on that now, but even growing up, do you feel like your mom, because of your dad's, like, where can I study universe? Now we're going here, we're going there. Like, did she have to kind of put her acting career on the back burner, or was she able to
Yeah.
do that? Okay.
Yeah, it was done. She was, as a kid, she was an actress in Hong Kong, and then that was kind of over after they met. And I saw her. I mean, I was a little boy. One of my earliest memories is watching her go to citizenship school in Santa Cruz to try to become a U.S. citizen, and learning all the different bits of U.S. history, and then getting up and doing the pledge and all these other things. And it's probably the earliest memory I have as a kid, and just thinking about how, looking back, we were talking about courage, but just thinking about how my mom must have faced that unknown, showing up in a place where she didn't speak the language at first and all these other things. And all of a sudden, this is your new home. This is your new reality. And that was a very big impression on me. But then we got to, it was also a super fun adventure, right? 80s, 90s, in bouncing around the world, Santa Cruz, and that's where I was born. I was born in Santa Cruz, so a little surfer town.
Mhm.
I mean, it was uh, it was an eclectic childhood. I'll just put it that way.
So I feel like it's funny you brought up courage. Like, my for my book, so I wrote a book called Return on Courage, and my first two interviews were my mom and my dad. But I didn't want to do them together. I wanted to do them separate, and I didn't want them to like sway each other. And I think when life is when you're just sort of on autopilot, which I think a lot of us are, unfortunately, for a lot of our lives. At least for me, I was until a certain age. When I kind of put life on pause and interviewed both of them, I got to see, well, the biggest aha by far is that courage is a relative idea. Like, there's some bunny slope courage people, and there's some black diamond. I mean, you're like triple black diamond, like, give me the helicopter. I want to jump out of it. But like, I actually honored my mom, like on the courage side. Like, she grew up in Ohio, didn't know any different, met her fiance at Ohio State, who was a few years older, who had moved to Maryland. And then she followed him after she graduated and was engaged to this man, and realized, no, this is not the guy for me, and had the courage to break it off. Versus my
Mm.
dad, She met my dad a couple years later, and thank God, because only half of me would have been here.
Mm-hmm.
Meets my dad. My dad came from like a whole, like, didn't really come from money, other side of the train tracks growing up. His mother was a socialite. His father was in a card room. They would have a weekly card game at the house. One guy would show up with a suit, and my dad's like 11 or 12. He's like, "What do you do?" And the guy's like, "I'm a lawyer." My dad's like, "I'm going to figure out how to be a lawyer," and like just put himself on a path to that. Fast forward to today, I see myself as like like a perfect combination of the two of them, and I'm lucky. My parents are still together. Like my dad is very strategic and has figured out his way, but he's also in front of juries, and like in some ways it's the people business. It's like, can I connect? Now my mom was a teacher, so she brought the sweetness, she brought the tact, she brought the, like, let's one step at a time, elementary school teacher. Do you see yourself, like you said, like, first of all, are your parents still together, and second, are you a perfect cocktail of the two of them?
Yeah, no, my parents were never a good match for each other. They were, I mean, they stayed together as long as they could, but it was, yeah, no, that was intense. They had very different personalities. But I am a blend of the two of them for sure. And then I got two little kids now, and I wonder, they're pretty similar in, I would say that they are a blend of their mother and I, and we're also not together. And it's kind of similar to what you said with your mom, but like their mother and I we're now kind of like best friends. But it took courage uh, for the decision to separate and become something different on everybody's part. But I look at my daughter, okay, for example, and on one hand, they see the kind of stuff that I do, and like, oh, Dad, we don't want to, like, I hate spiders, right? She's afraid of spiders, right? And I'm in like Spiderland all the time. There's, yeah, I've spent probably half of my time at work in the jungle. So when you wake up in the middle of the night and you go out, out of your tent to go pee in the jungle in the darkness, you turn on your flashlight and there's just a billion eyeballs staring back at you, and you're just, what? It's like, what? Uh, but my daughter doesn't want to do that. And then this last a couple of maybe about a year ago, she turns to me, and I just finished filming a long season, so I was kind of all beat up and haggard. And she says, I realized that I really want to play softball. And I'm like, okay, let's go for it, and she never played before. She's a little older than a lot of the girls that started out, and we just got into it. And I started helping coach and all these other things. And I just watched her go from being the beginner worst kid, player, and just stick with it all the way through. And she's still like there at the very beginning level. She's not like these pros that go to alter, but she's still sticking with it all the time. And then she goes, I want to pitch, Dad. I really want to pitch, because she sees the best player pitching, right? And so finally, one day she gets her shot. She spends every single afternoon throwing like a rolled up sock at the window, to try to practice pitch, right? She's just turned 11. And then one day she finally gets a shot, and she walks up onto this mound. And she got like one strike. She hit a bunch of batters. There was a ton of walk. All these things happened. I mean, it was a brutal game.
One
But
strike though.
yeah, she got one, and she stood up there and she took it, and she faced down this high pressure moment, knowing that she wasn't going to be some immediate superstar, but she still stood up, and she went back, and the very next day, she wanted to play catch again and try pitching against against our garage door. So to me, like you said, there's big courage, there's like jumping out of helicopters, going into the jungle courage, but the ones that really, I don't know, that was one of the most inspiring moments in my fatherhood, seeing somebody step up to a high pressure moment by choice, because they believe that there's some kind of dream that they want to follow. And
Well, that starts as a mound, right? Like, next thing you know, she's gonna have 100 spider eyes staring back at her. I mean, she's building the muscle. I mean, and it is big to her. How old are the kids?
she just turned 11. My son's 13, and he's also he's he actually literally is the skier, the crazy skier that, but they're just such sweet kids. I'm so lucky, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I think that their mom and I became so close as friends, even after the separation. We hang out all the time.
I'm at 11-9 and 11-8, and my daughter might as well be your daughter. Like I watched her pitch, and you're like, oh my gosh, you feel like she threw like one strike, and like my first thought is, I'm sorry, every other parent. Like that was my first thought. Like, I'm sorry, every other parent, but like it was so good for her to do it and to be up there. And it's a muscle. It's a muscle. You got to use the muscle and keep going. Um, I'm curious. I can't imagine your schedule isn't just bonkers, and I'm sure you're like 2 weeks off, two weeks here, a month gone, right? And as a guy that understands technology, I'm sure you have some fancy gadgets to keep in touch with the kids. But how does that play into all this? Like, how do you go about? And I'm on the road a lot too for what I do, but I'm not, like you said, I don't have spider eyes looking back at me. Like, how do you think about the lessons that they are taking away by watching what you're doing? And does it like weigh on you when you're off
Yeah.
on an adventure?
There's been different phases, right? When they were very, very young, I had a lot of trouble thinking about being away from home, and then when their mom and I split up and we figured out a good dynamic and a working relationship, we knew that half the time anyway, I wasn't going to be with them, and half the time she wasn't going to be with them, right? Um, but then, uh, but then I thought, then things got kind of started getting more and more intense with the kinds of expeditions we were on. Like for example, just this last year, there's been some close calls, right? We got crushed under a boulder, and it just barely missed my body and took out my prosthetic foot, right? I was in Sudan, getting like running away from tear gas right before they went into the coup. I was in Israel not too long ago, and nothing related to the war, but something happened on our scuba tanks, and there was a pretty bad accident almost. But then it's like, what happens if something actually happens to me, right? What do you do? Well, I don't know. I still grapple with that, right? You put everything in place. You make sure that the kids are gonna like they're not just gonna be left hanging, right? And you try to instill as much of your own person and your own whatever you are inside the essence of you into the way that you bring that to the fatherhood piece, and then you make the right plans. And I think I wrote a letter, and I was like, well, if something did happen to me, here's this letter, and it's basically like when you face these moments, everything always changes. That's the one thing I've learned about in my life. I mean, maybe the most fundamental insight is that I've had to face a lot of, and I think we all do face a lot of moments that remind us of the impermanence of all things. And if you hold on to the fact that you might lose what you had before, then you can't actually exist in the moment and be ready for what's coming next, and you can't be in that flow, whatever flow is, the flow of life. So a big part of my kind of experience with my kids was, hey, look, things start and they end, and they begin and they go, and at one point I might be gone, and it's not how you face well, it's not that you get to choose these things necessarily, but it's that you get to choose how you face them, and the kind of perspective that you layer onto them. And then on another level, I just don't work. I try not to work as much when I'm home. When I'm home, I go out and I'm fully there. I'm like, zoom, I'm in.
Yeah.
I barely text home. I used to text home all the time or call home. I used to bring home all these trinkets and things like this. And it was like, okay, our house is full of trinkets. And now I'm like, okay, there, I'm like in it. I'm focused. I'm really there. And then when I get home, I'm super present. I'm focused. I'm at every softball game. I'm at every, like I'm on the school board. I like go to all the events. I'm like, okay, this is my chance. If this is my 50%, I'm gonna make it feel like 1,000%. And that's been, I just feel so lucky. It's I feel so lucky to know them and to be in this relationship with them. And I feel like, if anything, we can't give up our passions. We just have to turn them into something that makes space for everybody.
What's your advice for people who, I mean, like, it's almost like it's easy to know that you have to change. It's easy to know that you have to face fear, but a lot of us, it's like thinking it and feeling it is very different than doing it, right? And then, some of the research that I did on courage, like our definition of courage is knowledge plus faith plus action, and you need all three of those levers. Knowledge and faith and no action is paralysis, and yet a lot of us sit there and we know exactly what we should do, and we never leap, and it's not that we never grow, but we could grow faster when we actually do. And so, what is your advice for somebody who is listening? They know what they should do and they feel it. I mean, the answer might be to just do it, but like, how do you
Oh
help?
no, I mean it's easier said than
Yeah.
done, right? But
Okay.
I think accountability, right? Like telling people that you're gonna do something makes a big difference. I started my career with this kind of weird, wild dream that sounded ridiculous the first time I said it out loud. I
Yeah.
just finished my last degree in college, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna sell everything I have, and I'm gonna give myself as much of a runway by having almost no overhead. I'm gonna live in my car, and I'm gonna build a project to look for the tomb of Genghis Khan using satellites and drones and radar. And I didn't know anybody at National Geographic. I wasn't even an archaeologist. I had no business saying this. And I think the first time I said it, it seemed almost like a joke. And then I said it again, and then I started saying it to all the people I knew, and I kept on saying it, and I kept on saying it, I kept on saying it, and then somebody would be like, I remember somebody asked me, "Well, do you really think you can find it?" And I had to say yes.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I was what am I even doing saying this, right? Like, I had to say, and every time I remember the first time I said yes, I was like, dude, that guy that's talking right now, which is me, is an idiot. What is he talking about, right? Um, and I kept on going and going and going. And before you knew it, about a year later, I was flying to Mongolia with the National Geographic grant, and, all my friends. And I think so part of it is accountability, right? Like the more you say something, the more you put yourself on notice to follow through.
I call that state it and create it.
Yeah. Yeah.
State it and
State it
create it. You got to
or
put it
fake
in.
it till you make it. One of the
Yeah.
one of the two. Fake it till you make it. That's another one, right? Uh, then there's like this smaller ones. You don't Not everybody has to quit everything they're doing and sell their stuff and move into their car. And there's daily things. So people think about, okay, what's one of the things that people say is the scariest thing to do? They say public speaking, right? I love public speaking, not because it's not scary, but because it is scary, because you get that butterfly feeling in your chest right before you go on stage, and there's no backing out. Once you've signed up for it, and as you get closer and closer, that butterfly feeling ramps up, and you can't run for the bathroom. You're in it, you're going. Everybody's staring, right? And so then you get to that place where you have to walk onto the stage and face your fear, and then the butterflies go away in this almost super liberating way once you're on the stage. But if you do that a couple of times, 3, 4, 5 times, the butterflies don't go away, but they become almost like a friend. And I feel like now when I think about the adrenaline junkie inside me, the one that likes to jump off a boulder into the ocean or drop down off the face of a cornice on a pair of skis, I guess I'm seeking that same feeling, that butterfly feeling. And it's because I in all those public speaking opportunities, which is probably my favorite place to feel it. I realize that it's actually a superpower. It feels like it's better than coffee. It makes you, it's like, okay, it puts you on this different altered state where you're just like, I'm here now,
Yeah.
and it's fun.
I wonder if I'm going back to Albert version selling all his shit in a car, right? Like, and I think that I think a lot of people visualize when they think of themselves and they want to go for it and be successful. they think about ceilings, like how high is the ceiling, and I don't think people commit to the reality of, well, how low am I? Where's the floor? Like how it's like a catapult. How like if you or a slingshot, like how far down am I willing to commit to go in order to slingshot back up? And I'm speaking from my own experience of like like you, like I was a entrepreneur that had no business being an entrepreneur. I was a television radio major that just wanted to do funny things. I came to California to write movies, not live one. I joked that I'd rather entertain 2.2 million people than have 2.2 kids, right? No business being an entrepreneur. And then opportunity decided to show up at the door and you're like, I can do that. We can do that. And it was fear and stubbornness, but conviction and like how low was I willing to go and to stick with this thing that I did believe in. It wasn't just doing it for the sake of doing it. Probably how you felt in your car, right? As you're like, yes, yes, I can do this. Now, have you ever done the Google game? Are you a Google game guy? You know what the Google game is?
No, tell me.
All right, so when you like put someone's name into Google and then it populates the next few words. So if I put in Albert Lin, try to guess the top three answers. They're short. They're short. I'll give you that. What do you think they are?
What you tell me? What does it
I'll
say?
give you okay. So Albert Lin, the first one is UCSD.
Yeah,
Okay, so give me that. Give me the
I
relationship to UCSD.
I did everything at UCSD. I was bachelor's, master's, and then ultimately a PhD, and then I stayed for a postdoc, and now that's kind of where I launched my Genghis Khan stuff. I was an engineering student, and then I stuck with it all the way through because San Diego is just, I don't know, I love it, right? The
Yeah.
surf. I got to San Diego as an undergrad because we lived in California. My dad was teaching at a UC at the time, and they didn't have a ton of money, and they're like, okay, well, UCs, we get a deal. And by that time, I was the youngest, and they didn't have any like they had no energy for taking me on college tours. They're like, okay, whatever. Here's a stack of college books that your brothers and sisters got. Pick one, and I saw this folder that had a picture of a campus on top of a mesa overlooking at the ocean, and it was like, that's it. I'm going there. I'm going to learn how to surf. And then I stopped.
I love that you're like it had nothing to do with learning anything other than surfing.
I'm gonna surf. That was it. I mean, it was I was there. And it was just UCSD has been a home for me ever since. I am, I still hold research scientist position there, but because I'm traveling around so much, it's a bit harder to stay grounded for classes. I do. I am now I've started this center called the Center for Psychedelic Research, which the university just announced, and we have our first clinical trial underway based off of some experiences that I had with the journey with phantom limb pain. And there, I'm the director of anthropology, which is a pretty cool and exploration. The director of anthropology and exploration for psychedelics at UCSD. That's a pretty rad. That's a
Yeah.
pretty
I can see
rad.
that business card being passed around at parties and being people like, tell me more. Not that we've got
Yeah,
business cards anymore, but you get what I'm saying.
yeah. Um, but no, it's awesome. That center is really meant to try to help people deal with a lot of the things that might be debilitating, like pain and things like this, through an understanding of the tools that we've had through time uh, to really access parts of our mind that might be beyond our normal states. And
Curious, where are you on like, I mean, obviously passionate about so much, right? But like, where are you on? Hey, there's an adventure, an expedition that happens in my mind versus an adventure that happens like, let's get on a plane and go somewhere halfway around the world.
mm,
Do they do they bring? I mean, are they the same? Are they Are they different? Do they bring different levels of joy to you?
well, yeah, for sure. But I do think that like this latest sort of topic goes they're married together in some way, right? Like a lot of what I've done in the past, yes, they're adventures, but they're adventures into our humanity, right? They're deep dives into the stories that come from our past. And a lot of times some of the most rewarding moments come from the cultures that are still there today, right? The indigenous communities that I've had this unbelievable privilege to be able to connect with throughout the world. And there I see this I don't this very living reminder of what it means to be human and the roots of our humanity. And if you look around at, I got a PhD in engineering, so I like engineering, right? But if you look around at everything that's ever been made, like literally everything from that thing on your head telling you what, making speakers and, to the microphone, to the board behind you that has the name of the podcast, it was all imagined in the mind first and then turned into reality. Everything in our world was imagined first. And even for the individual person, your world is unique. Every single of the nearly 8 billion people, there's 8 billion worlds and universes, because everybody has a very specific perspective and imagination and filter with which they see the world, and that's in the mind. So whether or not it's a physical adventure off to some far place, or whether or not it's purely in the mind, there's a spectrum in between, but it's all layered by how our mind perceives the world. And I look back at the indigenous communities that I talked about before and the tools that they have all used, like the early humans, like all across the board in every ancient city I found. The biggest monuments are these ritualistic monuments to our imagination, to, temples to the sun, temples to whatever. Like they're all there. They're like they're tapping into something that exists in our mind that's going beyond. So I'm very curious about this because I feel like we are, I don't know, maybe if you wanted to say what's the one, you asked me at the beginning, like what's the criteria? I guess I'm just a super existential dude. Like I've always just wanted to be like, what is all this? What is the universe?
Make sense of this.
What is this? And it just happens to be that you can do that through adventure and through this like deeply spiritual and scientific combination of exploration, which is the frontier, how we explore, how we've tapped into our minds throughout humanity.
This is a good segue to the second Albert Lin Google game, which is Albert Lin Lost Cities, which is probably not a surprise by that, right? But like, it's pretty cool that you've been like going back. I didn't know about the car. They just like, I'm going to sell everything and like, we're just going to start, right? And there was no National Geographic until there was National Geographic. But now you've been with them. I know you've done work with them, I think since 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
Like, what, how is, and by the way, it's more than just Lost Cities, and it's more than National Geographic. I saw you did something with Will Smith that was pretty cool. How was that experiment?
Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, no, I've been able to film in all kinds of different projects, whether it was Lost Cities or the latest season, which is Lost Cities Revealed. There's always a new title. They always pick a new title because they want a new thumbnail. Secrets of the Maya, or I've done a biblical series looking at ancient history, or I've done all sorts of things. But it all started back to that first project, which wasn't a film. It was purely an expedition. And it was 3 years, running through the mountains of Mongolia, looking for that tomb in Mongolia. I was able to spend time with, like you said, on shows like Welcome to Earth, which was this incredibly grand, amazing cinematographic experience where we traveled around, and it was during COVID, so we were really the first crew or maybe one of the only crews that was out in the world, filming at the time. I think Gordon Ramsay was the only other one from Nat Geo that was filming, and they said that we were essential workers because people needed something to watch when they were at home. They wanted people to stay home.
Wow.
So they sent us out, and yeah, Will and I got to run all over Africa, Namibia, all these different places. And he was a super cool guy, really, really humble. It was, obviously not right around the moment that all that stuff happened with the Oscars, and that was really unfortunate. But I still think the guy's like rock solid, because I saw him in the field. I saw him in these moments of, actually, I saw him in a moment that's relevant here. We repelled about 300 feet into a cave, and then we were supposed to scuba dive into this bottomless underwater lake, and there was no you know, there's the visibility in this thing is so crystal clear that you really can't get a sense or reference to whether or not you're rising or falling. So you're diving all on instruments, right? And it's pitch black, and there's no bottom. The bottom has never been mapped. It's just to the center of the world. And he wasn't the most experienced scuba diver, you know. And so we're down there, we're like in it, and I remember, you know, there was actually this moment that we don't talk about a lot, but he couldn't figure out his buoyancy, and he just started plummeting into the darkness, and I was like I was watching him pass by me, and I was going towards him, and I see his safety diver come down, and he just like he goes once and he misses and he goes twice, and the guys, as you're scuba diving, as you go down in depth, you accelerate faster. So it's a runaway train. And if you didn't get him on the second go, it was over. We would have lost him forever.
Wow.
And he just barely gets him. And then they're like trying to stop and arrest. And then they kind of, well, you know, it was a messy resurfacing that wasn't, you know, not protocol. Anyway, the next day, we get to the surface, and you know, actually that day we get to the surface, and he's like, okay, well, did we finish? That was really weird. What happened? You know, like, should we keep going? We didn't really get the scene, you know, and he was really calm. And I asked him, you know, what, like, I was like, just talking, I was like, dude, aren't you afraid? Like you almost just died. You know, he said, well, I grew up the son of an electrician in Philly, and every summer we had to go to work with him, and we'd work with all this high electricity in these big refrigeration systems and these big shopping malls and grocery stores. And my dad taught me that if you freak out, you die. So no freaking out, you know, because they're dealing. He as a kid was always playing with this, you know, playing and spending days with his dad in these high electricity situations. And so no matter what happened afterwards with Oscars and slaps and all this other stuff, I know that dude because I saw him almost die, and I saw him face his feet. You know, it was in the heart of a cave in the mountains of Namibia, and I got nothing but deep respect for that.
Yeah, this is obviously the Albert Lin podcast, not the Will Smith podcast. But there's a quote that I really liked that he talks about in the episode. He says, I think he said his grandmother said, all the best things in life live on the other side of fear. And, you know, we always fear and courage are kin. You can't get to one without the other. And I think this is a good lead to the third and final Google game, Albert Lin, which is probably not going to be surprising, but it's Albert Lin. You ready for this one?
What is it?
Leg. Right? It's like, okay, I get it. Yeah, I mean, it's that, right? But I tell you, you know, in the spirit of you speaking fluid metaphor, and you know, if I'm at the tip of the iceberg, getting to know you and prepare for this, it is leg. It starts as leg for me, and there's fear. There's fear of that, but then the irony is the more. This is before the show, but like obviously even now, like for a guy that is really exploring humanity, like the more I got to know you and study you, it's like the leg kind of went to the back of the bus. It was like I almost forgot. I almost forgot that you're half man and man is still half machine, right? Like I forgot that, but it's real, right? So like talk about the fear, you know, in the spirit of the Will quote, like. Is there fear still, like, or like, okay, maybe this is a weird question, but this is the courageous question. Like, what did you gain by losing the
A
leg?
lot. Yeah, a lot, man. I gained a lot, you know. Probably the most fundamental. I mean, there's the funny things, which actually are not that funny because they're very real. Like you know, being able to park up front, never have to pay for it for the rest of your life. That's real. Man, you gained something there. You know, I'm not joking. It's actually like
Okay.
huge perk. But and then also, you know, never having to wait in line at customs or Disneyland or yeah, that's a big deal.
Okay.
But also, it is there's other superficial things that are pretty powerful. Like it is a dismantling tool in any moment, right? Like if I walk into a tough meeting or I'm trying to get access to some weird place or whatever else, I do find that I often roll up my pant legs, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna show up here and I'm gonna throw them off their game, and then I've got the
Yeah.
home advantage, right? And just mentally, right? Then there's other physical little gains and wins, right? When I cross a river or I'm hiking through some sketchy part of the jungle, I lead with the prosthetic because, what snake is going to bite that? Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
Seriously, what are they going to do? So, and it actually did save my life once well, it didn't save my life, but when that boulder came rolling down, I was on it and I jumped out of the way. If this was actually still a foot, I would have been in a very different situation. So like the boulder landed here, took off this foot. So I think I'm the only guy I know who lost the same foot twice. But there's a deeper one, right? Like a much deeper one. It was scary. I spent a month in the hospital not knowing what to do. Everybody was talking about this word limb salvage, which is a scary word in itself. It's like, what, and I had never seen an amputee in my life. I'd never met one. It was something that you kind of see relegated to stories of war, or in black and white photos of the Civil War, where it's like, oh, your life's over, right? All these other things. I live in San Diego. There's a lot of military here, and even then, I didn't really ever meet an amputee, and yet it was like, what's it gonna be? Should we do this? And I remember that whole sort of debate. Should I go through years of unknown surgeries to try to piece together whatever mangled bits of my body, could be put back together with other parts of my body? And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you could make it look like a leg, but you're never going to walk the same way again. You'll never surf, do all those other things, right? What is it going to be like? And it was a real big moment of fear. And I remember my buddy Brent walked in the hospital one day, and I was lying there, on all these pain meds and maybe 2 surgeries in. It was brutal. And he showed me this picture that is right over my shoulder here. This picture of this guy riding in the heart of a barrel wave, with a big bright prosthetic sitting on the back of his foot. Now, I've always loved surfing. I've never been that good. I'm a wannabe most of the time. So I never had been in a barrel wave, let alone thought I could be in a barrel wave with a prosthetic foot. This is Mike Coots, I found out. And Mike is, he's probably one of my biggest heroes in life. He had his leg bitten off by a tiger shark, came back, became one of the world's adaptive surf champions, and probably one of the most outspoken shark conservation advocates in the world. And it's like, man, here's a guy who chose not to be a victim, but to be the champion of his own moment, right? And that changed. That one image, that single image, changed everything for me. It changed my entire framing of the moment, right? And Mike, my buddy, reached out to him. He didn't know me. He ended up calling me, and it was incredible. And then we ended up the very first week I got out of the hospital. Pretty much, okay, so the day after that, I'm like, cut the leg off, let's go. And I hadn't really cried or had a big moment up until then. I was in this deep romance, like this budding romance with this really, really beautiful woman. And she'd been there by my side. She'd made me keep this positive mental outlook on the whole thing. But then all of a sudden, I'm like, cut it now, let's go. And the doctor comes in and is like, well, we had to cut it anyway. We found out you have a bone infection. You're going to die in like a few hours if you don't do this. So let's go. Boom, cut it off. I remember waking up and looking around and just being like, oh my God, everything has actually changed. There's a few things like that when you realize just how black and white and how non-reversible something can be, it's like, what? Actually, I wasn't expecting to feel this way, right? And this feeling of, that was probably the only time I truly wept during the process, because it was like, oh my God, there is a part of me that died. Like there's a part of my own body that's being buried or burned or cremated somewhere. Like I actually physically lost a part of myself, big part. Every step I took was gone in a certain kind of way, right? Then there was this other moment of operation where this organization in San Diego that's been another incredible, maybe a great vehicle for you to look at. I don't know if you've already interviewed anybody associated with this org, but the Challenge Athletes Foundation, you know, where they where our mutual friend Laura actually, you know, was a big
What's
time.
up, Laura? Hi,
Yeah,
Laura. Thanks.
yeah. And and they were holding this annual triathlon down in the beach with all this incredible community of amputees, you know, and support the network of the community that supports around, you know, around this thing that is quote unquote disabilities, or, you know, differently abled. And I remember, you know, my friend Ben, he's like, you got to go to this thing, Ben Wood, and he's like, gets me in a wheelchair. It was the first thing I did out of the hospital. I'd not left the house since, and up until that point, I remember looking in the mirror and being like, am I still like, who am I? Like, what are people gonna think when they see me? Is it gonna be scary? Am I gonna be ugly? Like, am I some weirdo now? Like, what is this? And then he gets me in this wheelchair, and I had all that fear. I mean, I'm missing a leg, right? And I didn't have a prosthetic at the time, and I'm just going out, and we show up to the beach, and there's all these kids, you know, with maybe one or two or even three missing limbs, maybe four, running a marathon, you know, running a triathlon, right? And it was like, what do I have to complain about, right? Like all this support around me. Let's do this. And then Mike, who was in that picture, happened to be right there, and they wheel me up to him, and boom, we're instantly friends. And that
Isn't that
that
crazy?
and now, you know, years later, he's been teaching me how to surf, and I've gotten really close to being in the heart of a barrel. I've actually been in the heart. He's been teaching me how to tow in on the North Shore. We've been dropping in at 20-foot waves. It's been awesome, you know, awesome. What a journey. And I've had this incredible community of surfers now that support me up in, you know, I surf at Blacks, which is a big wave, you know, kind of a big heavy wave here in San Diego. And the UCSD chancellor actually hooked me up with a key, so I don't have to make the trek down, you know, that crazy hill. But you'll see me at Blacks all the time, and having the key is a big bonus, by the way, because then in the lineup, people know that if they're mean to you, then they're not going to get a ride up. So you know, you get to have a really big of the point. Uh, but it shows you what a single image can do, or what a narrative can do. You know, we internalize these narratives, and it defines that perspective I was talking about that creates your world, right? So now when you say, yeah, it almost melts away. That's almost by design, because what I do on TV mostly, it's like, okay, I remember when I was beginning, it was like, well, there's this decision, because I'd already been filming with Nat Geo, and all of a sudden they call me like, okay, you're an amputee now, and all these other things, but they didn't even say anything about that. They're like, hey, your buddy Tom just collected a bunch of LiDAR in the jungle. We got a helicopter waiting. You want to go? You think you can do it? And, you know, they were off. But I remember thinking to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wear pants for the first act or the first scene of every show I do, you know, mostly. And then like halfway through the show, I'll roll up the pant leg and I won't say anything about it, and just sort
Love
of,
it.
you know, so that it's not like everything is defined by this, but that
Right.
you're defined by this, and then this is just a part of it, right?
Yeah. I have now that we agree that we're besties that both live here in town. I have a favor. I have advice. I need advice. So there have been times in my life where I'll see an amputee, and my first thought immediately is to be go up to them and say, what happened?
Mm.
And then it's immediately followed by, do not do that. And because you just don't know. You don't know, do people want? So
Yeah,
what's the right answer on this?
I don't know. I mean, it's different for everybody, right? It's different for everybody. Some people love, like, some people actually, it's a big part of their identity, and there's no judgment on that, because it does change your experience in life, but it's also one that, you know, I think people can celebrate, and for a lot of people, they celebrate it, right? And are stoked.
I never saw it as like a tone deaf thing. Like, I saw it as my way of connecting, you know, like
Yeah, no, I think it's solid. I don't know what other people's responses are. I know that there's one thing that I probably would give advice on is that I've had people say to me before, "Oh, what happened?" And it's like, "Oh, was it?" They always think I'm military. I'm like, "Oh no, I'm not military. It's an accident." And then they go, the next thing is usually like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you," and I'm like, "Wow, that's really not the way that I
See it.
experience, right? Like I feel almost proud, I guess. I don't know, like grateful. The amount of love that came from the community to get me off my feet made me feel this deep sense of humanity that I was a part of, and the gratitude around that was so overwhelming that there's nothing negative when I think about what happened to me. When I talk to my kids about it, they're like, "Yeah, this is probably the best thing that happened to us. We got tighter as a family, right?"
Yeah.
Uh, when I think about my what I can be in media now, running around leading a high tech, high adventure, expedition oriented show for National Geographic. It's like, man, I don't feel sorry for the fact that I have this. I feel like this is a way that I can show, maybe I can pass on a bit of this, to somebody that might be sitting in a hospital bed, uh, watching TV, wondering what their life is going to be like, right? I feel very, very grateful. So I think that the only piece of advice I'd give to folks that bump into, an amputee and want to connect, it's like every amputee is going to have their own perspective, or every person's going to have their own perspective of their lived journey. So it's just be mindful not to project what you think
Right.
that person might be feeling. Because I never feel sorry for myself. I'm pretty psyched. I'm like, hey, I got better parking than you. So, I feel pretty good about this.
Well, it's cool to hear, at some point I was like writing notes and it was like, part man, part machine, all explorer, but really it's like part man, part machine, all humanity. It's like, it's interesting that it made you more human. It brought out
Yeah.
humanity. It brought out more in humanity, which I think is part of the experiment for my life. Just like you, it's like trying to design a life where I'm surrounding myself with courageous people that want to stretch and want to push that. And I'm sure you feel the same way, like on the expedition, on the adventure, on that curious wanderlust gene that you didn't even know you had, that you do have. Like if you could do that for the rest of your days and embark that on your children. And I mean, I always say I'm hoping maybe one of my two kids will be courageous and go for it. Right? That would be a huge victory. How do you?
Softball.
Sal, you're right. Two strikes in one game. Maybe we'll start there. Uh, how do you want to leave the audience? Like when you think about, what do you got for us?
I gotta go. Just leading off of what you just said. I was just talking to our mutual friend Laura. I'm starting my own. I'm trying to create more content directly to YouTube and podcasts and things like this as well, because I think this is where a lot of when I travel the world, this is where everybody that's out there really is all. That's where they are. There was one story that really caught my eye recently, and one that I'm about to go and try to explore in Borneo, where this archaeologist stumbled across accidentally found this skeleton, and the skeleton was roughly 31,000 years old, and it was an amputee. It was this skeleton that had a severed leg right where, like, right, I think it was the right leg actually below the knee, and the bone had grown back, and there was osteogrowth. So you knew that the person lived after the amputation and lived for some time, right? This one little piece of evidence tells a big story, because 31,000 years ago, somebody had to care for that person. Somebody had to love that person and really work to try to keep that person from dying in that moment, and keeping the wound clean, and actually amputating the leg, and like bringing food or helping them hunt or whatever else, right? And that person also had to experience something. They had to face this unbelievable trauma with whatever grit exists in our shared humanity, right? This pain, but to want to live, to want to continue on, even through all of that, right? I look back at my own experience and I think about, most specifically, my kids and those that were closest to me when that all happened to me. And I just think about The fact that they, my daughter would wake up in the morning and make breakfast, have my clothes ready, and put my leg next to my bed, right? My son, I remember we went on a trip not too long, maybe a little while afterwards, and I was having trouble getting up, to the top of this sand dune, and I was like, oh, my legs, son, I don't want to, like, we can't go to the top of the biggest one. We'll just go to this low one. He's like, no, Dad, we're going to the top of the biggest one. And then when we got there, he's like, see, Dad, just like before, we never say quit. Whatever we believe in, we can do, right? And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm almost crying thinking about this again now. It brings me to such emotion, because 31,000 years ago in a cave in Borneo, humanity showed that it wanted to care for somebody else. And that's, that's what I experience, and what we all experience in our greatest moments of need, is that we are connected as humans, that these aspects that are living inside us are what make us tick. And, it's not just about courageous as an individual, it's courageous as a community. It's that sense of support for each other that makes the courage really worth it. And that's what I'm grateful for. That's what I want to end with.
I love it. Well, welcome to the squad. I mean, you're definitely, you're in, you're a part of the community. No, man, I'm moved by your words. It's cool to hear, again, I'm back to the definition, like knowledge is the think, faith is the feel, and action is the do. And I feel that I can both feel your think, connected to your feel, right? And I think that's what it's all about, when head and heart kind of play together. Like, don't deny it and keep on going. So what an awesome episode. Thanks so much for joining us, Albert. Keep rocking. And just to make sure we're super clear, what Albert's saying is he's got a podcast coming too. and however I can help you,
Man.
you don't need my help, but like, however, if you want to talk tips, I've now done 150 of these, and I can tell you it ain't about me. But I get to learn from guys like you, and it's, we're just going to keep chopping wood on this side.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and if anybody wants, I'm on Instagram at Explore Albert. I got a couple of shows on Disney Plus and Nat Geo and Hulu. So hope you guys find me out there.
Check out all the stuff. I mean, look, if someone has made it to the 59th minute or the 60th minute, they already know they're in. And check out Albert Lin stuff. Thanks for joining us, man. Stay courageous out there. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.